Right, now members of Parliament have warned the Department of Justice and Correctional Services or Correctional Development to get its finances in order. Earlier today, the Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services said it won't approve the Justice Department's budget if the ministry doesn't get to act on its APPs. Now, for more on this worrying development, Justice and Correctional Services Minister Ronald Lamola is part of our conversation. Also with us tonight is Advocate Paul Hoffman, Director of Accountability Now, and a commentator certainly on these matters. Gentlemen, good evening and thank you very much for your time and for coming on tonight here on In Focus. Minister, let me begin with you. If we were, and even by your own reporting, to look at the Corruption Perception Index, where you certainly, your department plays a leadership role there, it doesn't look good. More and more South Africans today believe that corrupt people in this country are literally going scot-free without being addressed and being brought before the justice system. It should certainly worry you. And what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, thank you, and evening to the viewers at home. Indeed, that remains a concern of the department. Hence, we continuously support the provision of resources to the National Prosecuting Authority and also the extension of the courts, the special commercial crimes courts. You will know that we do not have some of them in provinces like in Limpopo, in Mpumalanga, and we have also added some in the Eastern Cape and also improved the ones at Gauteng, about 4 courts, including one in the Northwest in the last 3 financial years. And also with regards to the NPA, you will have seen that we have been giving them an additional budget every year with the help through the National Treasury. And this year also an additional budget of about 934 million has been added to help the NPA to deal not only with corruption but organized crime and also other related crimes that the NPA is responsible to prosecute with the police. I do believe that with these resources and also with the recruitment that they are doing of getting and training in the NPA and also some in certain cases which they believe are specialized and complex, appointing in terms of Section 38, they will definitely turn around the situation.
One of the areas, Minister, that is being pointed out is one as a weakness for you and your department is that majority of officials, in fact 79% of them are at retirement age, which is representing a rather huge threat in terms of capacity, especially of court services to deliver on some of these issues that you say you want to deliver on. How are you addressing that?
Yeah, there's also a flip side to that. Those are also very experienced officials that you do need their officials and also for them to impart the knowledge to the younger staff. And we are working on the recruitment processes of getting new and growing our own timber, which will enable the old guard to train the younger guard, which is a kind of a generational mix that is necessary and which is happening and going. And you can be able to see through our performance indicators that since I took over, the department was performing at almost 50% or less. Now the department is performing at about 80% in terms of the performance indicators, which is a 30% improvement since 2019, which is a significant improvement, which even the Portfolio Committee has acknowledged. We now need to translate that into the experiences of the people on our court services, maintenance services, the operations of the courts, the master's offices. So that needs to be translated into reality and also into cutting the queues and people getting access to justice across the country. So that is what we will be working on. in this last financial year for the 6th administration.
Yeah, Advocate Hoffman, the department is structured into 5 programs: administration, court services, state legal services, national prosecuting authority. The minister has touched on that quite extensively, and then there are auxiliary services and other associated services. How would you rate their performances as somebody who's in the legal space?
I'm afraid the performance of late is not up to scratch, which is why state capture seems to be carrying on with impunity. It may have stopped when the Guptas left the country in a particular incarnation, but the news at the coalface is that corruption is still rampant in South Africa. We've heard from the former CEO of Eskom that over R1 billion a month is looted at Eskom even now. So what is really needed is a radical rethink, a radical reform of the criminal justice administration, because it is not working as it should in its current formation. You'll remember, because you're a Madala, that the work against serious crime, corruption, organized crime, used to be done by the Scorpions and not by the police at all. But when the Zuma administration started, the Scorpions were disbanded, the police took over the investigative work in respect of serious crime and corruption, and the prosecution work stayed in the same tent with the Scorpions. That ended with Zuma, and the result has been that poor investigations by the police have led to poor prosecutions by the prosecution service. Both services, the police, for which this minister is not responsible, so I can't point a finger at him, but certainly in the National Prosecuting Authority, far too many people on the personnel have been deployed there to see to it that those responsible for state capture are able to continue unpunished, right, and never see the inside of a court. And until radical reform, and we have suggested this for more than a decade now, we have suggested that the radical reform has to be to put the investigation and the prosecution into a new Chapter 9 institution that has the attributes, criteria, the characteristics that the court has laid down in binding terms for the guidance of the legislature and the minister, right, in formulating the way in which this serious type of crime is counted in.
Let's hold it right there and take a break. When we come back, we'll get the minister just to weigh in on that conversation. Justice and Correctional Services Minister Ronald Lamola, Advocate Paul Hoffman staying with us. In Focus continues shortly. Minister, certainly if I'm looking at your APP report, and you know it better than I do, but if we were to look at, for example, reported cases of corruption that have been investigated and certainly reported to us, and those that have been finalized, and you weigh them, you will certainly find that you yourself did not reach the targets that you have set for yourself in terms of those cases, which certainly creates this impression that the NPA is not doing well in prosecuting those particular cases. Are you willing to concede and admit that you have not done well, and certainly the suggestion that there needs to be some reform in how that matter is tackled?
Thank you, Thabo. If you look at the stats, you will see that most of the matters related to corruption at the Specialized Commercial Crimes Court, there's a very high conviction rate by the NPA. I do think that the number of matters where there is a challenge is the high-profile cases, that there has been a number of acquittals, and also some of them not being properly investigated, and also the prosecution challenges and so forth. And we are open to the discussion of looking into the role of the NPA on these matters. Hence, you will remember that the President, when he submitted the report on the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, indicated that we are going to proceed to make the ID permanent, and also that he has appointed an anti-corruption advisory panel that will look into various aspects and advise government on issues of prevention, and also in the proper architectural design of an institution that can deal decisively with corruption. But at this stage, as a temporary measure, we need to attend, as a matter of agency, to strengthen the hand of the NPA and the ID to deal with these matters and also provide certainty to them, particularly the ID, in making it permanent and enhancing their powers. The advisory council that the President has appointed will provide us with opinions and issues that of advice that we can look into in the entire design of this kind of an institution. That will not only rely on the Department of Justice, because it has got a wide mandate, and also it will also require other government departments like the police, finance, even the entirety of the state, and even civil society, particularly on issues of prevention, awareness, and so forth, and on issues of what type of institution. It will also require the whole of the state to engage and be involved and make a decision of the type of institution that will be effective in dealing with this matter. But as you will have seen from our report, we report on the cases and the APP, what happened in the previous financial year, and the amount that we are providing to the NPA to give them support, and also for the department in terms of ensuring that the courts continue to function, to ensure that we mitigate the factors, including of load shedding, where we have provided generators, issues of solar, to about 120 courts, and also engaging with the Department of Public Works.
Yeah. Are you saying to us, sorry, Minister, let me jump in there, because, I mean, what we have seen just last week in the Eastern Cape, if I'm not mistaken, the magistrate court there having to cancel a hearing twice because of load shedding. There's another one, I seem to forget, I think if it's not in Mpumalanga, it's one of those other, it's either in KZN. But especially the magistrates court seem to be neglected and not be capacitated in as far as that question of load shedding is concerned.
Yes, hence most of the additional projects that we have added with Public Works will be focusing on the magistrate courts, so that we also help them to still function even during the period of load shedding. Some of them do have generators, tower, but unfortunately the generators were not primed for more than 2 hours of load shedding that are in some of these courts. Now the load shedding goes beyond 2 hours, and therefore it struggles even in some of the high courts. Hence, even there, we need to enhance those generators, so that the wheels of justice continues to grind even when there's load shedding. And this does not only affect the courts, it also affects the office of the masters across the country, and this leads to very long queues and delays. So this is a matter of absolute priority on our part, and that's why we're attending to it, so that we are able to be responsive, people are able to access justice, no matter what is the electric challenges and circumstances in the country.
Advocate, are we not giving the NPA the necessary, I suppose, credit, according to the minister, as far as, for example, officials? They've got a high number of convictions there, but maybe it's the big fish, the high-profile guys that we are seemingly not getting that right.
Yes, I'm afraid the NPA in its current incarnation is not capacitated to go after serious corruption. It's going to have to use senior members of the bar to run cases, and to do that, it's going to have budget to pay the senior members of the bar to be the prosecutor in the case. But, you know, we're spending money to counter load shedding. If we spent the money to counter corruption, there would be no load shedding at all. And that is what the problem is. The essential problem, item 1 in the minister's own report, is dealing with corruption. He's quite right. If we deal with corruption, your previous story about no facilities in the hospitals wouldn't have been a story, because there would have been money for it. Instead, the money is disappearing. The estimate in relation to state capture in the last few years is between 1 and 2 trillion rand. And then they boast that they've only managed to seize 12 billion rand. That's a tiny fraction of what has gone wrong and what needs to be addressed. And I'm afraid it's not going to happen until the legislature and the executive take the findings in the Glenister litigation seriously and create a system which complies with what the courts have laid down. What the courts laid down is binding on the minister, binding on Parliament as well. And you need to have specialized, trained, independent, properly resourced personnel who are secure in their tenure of office. And upgrading the ID does not address that in any way, shape or form. The upgrade of the ID to make it permanent puts it exactly where the Scorpions were before they were closed down, and just as vulnerable as the Scorpions were to being closed down. What is needed is a super body, what we call the Chapter 9 Integrity Commission, and right. The DA calls it the Anti-Corruption Commission. But it's the same body, and it ought to be housed in Chapter 9. It ought to be reporting to Parliament and not to the executive, and it ought to be getting on with the urgent business of raking back loot.
Let's leave it there. Much appreciated. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on tonight. That is the Justice and Correctional Services Minister, Ronald Lamola, as well as Advocate Paul Hoffman.